Escape from the shadows, a journey from survival to strength. I never intended to fall into a trap, but loneliness has a way of opening doors you never meant to. I'd felt it since childhood, like a space carved out of my world just for me, filled with echoes and empty chairs. My parents were distant, not cruel, just physically and emotionally absent. And friends? I never quite fit. So I chased connection, each relationship another lifeboat in a choppy sea, until Tinder landed me in Tom's life. It was 2019, and I was desperate enough to try yet another dating app. I swiped through faces until one, oddly familiar, made me pause. Tom. He wasn't model perfect, but his bio spoke to me: films I loved, a love for dogs, an interest in books. Substance, finally. We matched almost instantly, and the conversation flowed easily. No crude jokes, no pressure, just normalcy. He pressed to meet right away, and I agreed. Regrettably, I invited him to my parents' house. In my bedroom. In retrospect, inviting someone I barely knew into such private space should have been a red flag. But I wanted to believe in kindness over suspicion. Our first night blurred into every lonely fantasy I'd ever carried. He seemed kind, affectionate. But as the hours passed, pressure crept in. Even the walls of that familiar space felt foreign when his words cut too sharp, the weight of "I love you" pressing hard soon after. We talked long into the night, but I realized too late that was just the beginning of an illusion. We spent the next weeks together, and Tom wove a story. Expelled from his home, he had nowhere else to go. I believed him, partly because I wanted to. My parents, wanting to help their daughter, reluctantly agreed he move in. Suddenly, my bedroom, my sanctuary, was his territory. He trashed it with bottles, clothes, the residue of his mess. I woke to dirty cups by my bed, his unwashed laundry on the floor. I'd scrub and sweep, but no matter how much I tidied, the space felt polluted by his presence. The energy I brought home dissolved into exhaustion. I became his caretaker, his minder, his enabler. He had a diagnosed disability, and he used it like a weapon. If I can't do it, who will? If I questioned his choices, he'd sigh, and the room would turn cold. I was trapped between guilt and fatigue, believing I was being loving. But the scales tipped quickly. What began as help became servitude. He ran the electricity, food, money, benefit payments I tried to claim were quickly swallowed up by his demands. He controlled what I wore, where I went, when I could call my parents. I began to vanish, my identity reduced to his needs. Every time I felt a spark of rebellion, he choked it. "If you leave me," he whispered, "you won't even get your phone back. You deserve nothing." My world shrank to his flat, then to his bed, where he demanded pleasure but refused affection, except when it suited him. Emotional abuse turned physical, stifling nights and controlling days piled upon me. I felt disgusting for what I did next, but I needed relief. It came in the form of a lover I met online, Sam. He was gentle, charismatic, compassionate. He wasn't a solution, but he was a mirror, reflecting back the person I used to be. In moments of clarity, I realized that surviving Tom wasn't living. So planning to escape became the new mission. My relationship with my parents had deteriorated. I'd lied, cut ties, isolated myself. But together with Sam, quietly, secretly, we pieced together a plan. A weekend home visit with Tom's family became our exit point. Morning light came quietly, and I feigned an excuse. Tom thought I was headed to a relative's house. Instead, I slipped around the corner, found my father's waiting car, and climbed in. My heart pounded so loud I thought Tom might hear it, smell my guilt. In silence, we gathered the few things I'd left behind: clothes, my phone, a journal filled with hope and fear. I asked Dad to drive past the council house, where Tom continued to live, oblivious. I changed streaming passwords, canceled the joint benefits account, and spoke with our internet provider to temporarily shut off service. Everything triggered emotion: fear, relief, terror, hope. It felt like stepping off a cliff with no promise of soft landing. I snorted curses at the unfairness. Why should I lose everything because of someone else? That night, I texted Tom. Simple, cold words: "It's over. I'm done." I didn't stay to watch his reaction. The next morning, I rang the council. I explained I'd ended the joint tenancy and was pulling out. Through policy, procedure, and sometimes luck, they understood. In a week, Tom was without a home. Gone. I told the police about stalking messages, his threats, copying all the data before blocking him. He sent 1 or 2 barrage emails: vitriol, humiliation, rage. But after the police spoke to him, and I formally pressed charges, he vanished. It's 2025 now. I'm almost 30. I've rebuilt everything. I live with Sam. He loves me not when I'm useful, but when I'm me. We talk, laugh, negotiate chores together. I earned a full-time job in publishing, and the pay makes me feel stable in a way I never did before. My relationship with my parents is how I always wanted it to be, not distant, but warm. They admit they missed seeing me suffer. I forgive myself for loving wrongly. I'm not who Tom made me feel I was, helpless, disposable. I'm preparing to speak at a local women's support group this September, about abuse, coercion, recovery. And yes, about cheating. Because I owe the truth to myself before I speak it to others. There are days I still wake up in a cold panic. I've learned that echoes don't always disappear, but in healing, they lose volume. I take therapy sessions, journal prayers, daily walks, and Sam's silly jokes that break the tension. 2 years of hell, I realize, formed the crucible of my life. But here I am, out. I learned that the most important red flag isn't what someone does to you, it's what they make you believe about yourself. And if the answer is anything less than, you deserve better, leave. The first few nights after I left Tom were the hardest. Not because I missed him, no, those feelings had dried up long ago, but because the silence was so unfamiliar. After years of being constantly on edge, I didn't know how to live without fear humming underneath my skin. The house was quiet. My parents had made up the guest room for me, and I laid there with the moonlight cutting across the floor, my heart thudding in the stillness. No screaming. No doors slamming. No panicked glances over my shoulder. I kept waiting for his voice, for the sound of his keys in the door, for the vibration of my phone lighting up with another insult. But none came. I clutched my phone, half expecting him to break through the blocks somehow. I even left it face down once, terrified that just seeing his name would drag me back to that mental prison. I was shaky, paranoid, and filled with guilt. Not guilt for leaving, but guilt for staying so long. My dad came in the next morning with a cup of tea. "He can't hurt you anymore," he said softly. That was the first time I cried. Not for Tom, but for myself, because someone finally said it out loud. I still remember the trembling in my fingers when I contacted the police. I didn't want to be dramatic. I was terrified of being dismissed. But the stalking had started. He sent a series of emails that escalated from "you ruined my life" to "I know where you live." It was filled with venom, accusations, manipulation, his final grasp of control slipping through his fingers. I showed the officer screenshots of the messages. The email threats. The calls from blocked numbers I never picked up. They took it seriously. They arranged for someone to visit Tom. I wasn't there, but I imagined the confrontation. Maybe he raged. Maybe he cried. Maybe, for once, someone saw through his act. After that visit, it all stopped. No more emails. No more numbers. Just, nothing. He vanished like smoke from a long extinguished fire. I wish I could say life turned magical overnight. It didn't. Healing was slow. Some days I woke up angry, at myself, at him, at the world. Other days I felt like a ghost, floating between tasks, unsure who I was now that I didn't have to survive every moment. I started therapy. That was terrifying too. Talking about the past meant dragging it into the light, naming the things I had tried to bury. "He isolated you," my therapist said during one of our first sessions. "He used your kindness, your loneliness, as a weapon." That broke me. Because deep down, I had known. But hearing someone else say it gave me permission to stop blaming myself. Sam, the man I had secretly spoken to while planning my escape, was patient. He didn't rush me into a relationship. We talked, mostly. He listened. He didn't flinch when I told him about the nights I cried myself to sleep or how I had once believed I deserved the treatment I got. He never said, "That's behind you now, move on." Instead, he said, "I'll be here while you figure it out." That was everything. After a few months, I moved in with him, not because I needed saving, but because I had saved myself and finally felt safe enough to share space with someone again. One of the hardest parts of leaving Tom was facing the damage I had caused in my family relationships. I had pushed my parents away. Lied to them. Snapped at them when they tried to help. I had let Tom turn me against them. But they welcomed me back with open arms. "I'm just glad you're back," my mom said one evening. "We didn't know how to reach you anymore." It wasn't instant forgiveness, it was a slow rebuilding. But we were honest this time. I told them everything. They listened. We cried. We cooked dinner together again, watched movies, shared stories. I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. And they told me they were proud of me, for surviving, for leaving, for starting over. I began to explore the pieces of myself that had gone dormant. I picked up a notebook and started writing again. Poetry, journal entries, letters I'd never sent. Writing became a mirror. I could track my healing, each entry a little steadier, a little more hopeful. I applied for jobs and eventually landed a position in a small publishing company. It was nothing glamorous, but it was mine. I showed up every day, poured myself into the work, and grew into the role. Earning my own income was empowering. Nobody could take it from me this time. Sam and I traveled a little, nothing fancy, just road trips, weekend getaways. We'd pull over for roadside snacks, take goofy pictures, and I'd find myself smiling without effort. One night, I sat on the back patio, sipping tea, and I let myself reread one of the old messages Tom had sent, before I deleted everything for good. It read, "You'll never be anything without me." And I laughed. Because I was so much more without him. I was finally free. I was safe. I was loved. I was healing. And most importantly, I believed I was worthy of all of that. Now, 2 years after I left him, I see that leaving wasn't just about escaping Tom. It was about reclaiming myself. Every step I took away from him was a step toward the woman I am now, stronger, braver, softer, louder. If anyone reading this is stuck in the same kind of darkness, please know that light does exist. It may feel like your world will end without them, but trust me, that world wasn't worth living in anyway. The real world, the one where you get to breathe freely, laugh fully, love safely, is waiting for you. And you're allowed to run toward it. Healing doesn't end with escape, it starts there. The hardest part of my journey wasn't leaving Tom. It was learning how to live again without him. Or more accurately, without the version of myself I had become in his shadow, quiet, apologetic, small. The first year after leaving him felt like waking from a coma. My senses were sharper. Music made me feel things again. Even mundane things, like standing in the aisle of a grocery store, choosing my own cereal, felt monumental. I didn't need permission anymore. I didn't have to explain my choices or calculate how every decision would be twisted against me. For the first time in years, my life belonged to me. There's a moment every survivor experiences when they stop flinching at their own story. For me, it came unexpectedly during a support group I'd been attending. The room was quiet, filled with other women, each with their own version of a man like Tom. One woman, younger than me, had tears in her eyes as she described the feeling of being trapped. I looked at her and saw my 2019 self, the girl who thought love meant sacrifice. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't hold back. I used to think being strong meant staying, I said. That if I loved him enough, I could fix him. But strength is leaving. It's packing your bags in silence, slipping out when no one's looking, and trusting that what's on the other side, anything, is better than where you are. That night, a few women came up to me afterward. One hugged me. Another asked if I could help her file a report. And in that moment, I realized, the pain hadn't been meaningless. It had carved space for my voice to matter. Even with Tom gone physically, he lingered like a virus in the digital corners of my world. Every few months, I'd get a friend request from a random profile with no picture. A message that started with hey and ended with silence when I didn't reply. I knew it was him. There was a familiarity in the cadence, the mistakes, even the way he capitalized certain words. So I documented every attempt, every message. I kept a digital trail in a locked folder, ready to report again if needed. The police had warned me that abusers often test boundaries years later. But you know what? I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't jump when my phone buzzed. I didn't lose sleep over the possibility of him finding me. He no longer had a key to the places in me he once controlled. When Sam and I moved in together officially, I expected to carry old habits with me. I thought I'd hide snacks in drawers, instinctively lower my voice when asking to buy something, or flinch when someone knocked on the door. But Sam was different. He noticed the small things. "Why are you asking permission to buy a plant?" he asked once, laughing gently. "You don't need to ask me for that." It stunned me. I hadn't even realized I had. He'd leave notes on the bathroom mirror, "You were amazing." He'd ask if I wanted to cook together, not demand I serve him. When I was tired, he'd tell me, "Rest. I've got it." It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. Loving, flawed, human, and healthy. I began to breathe easier in my own skin. We decorated our flat together. Photos of us from little trips hung on the walls. Shelves of books I'd always wanted to read stood proudly. And a little jade plant sat on the windowsill, thriving in the sunlight. I've become a magnet for other women's stories. Friends confide in me. Strangers message me after I share pieces of my past online. Sometimes I wonder if I should have spoken out sooner. But I wasn't ready then. I was still in survival mode. Now, I speak. Loudly. Openly. I advocate. Because red flags are easier to see in hindsight. But I tell people what I wish someone had told me. If they isolate you from friends and family, it's not love. If they guilt you into intimacy, that's not passion, it's control. If they make you feel small so they can feel big, that's not protection, it's abuse. And if leaving feels like dying, it's because you've been living in someone else's life. It's now mid-2025. I have a stable job in a publishing office I adore. My mornings start with coffee and quiet peace. I talk to my parents weekly. I've reconnected with my younger cousin who once called me her hero. She tells me she's proud of me for leaving. Sam and I are planning a small vacation to the coast, something simple, meaningful. He says he wants to watch the sun rise with me. I say I want to watch it set and then stay to count the stars. I no longer define myself by what I endured, but I won't forget it either. That story is etched into my bones. It made me fierce, tender, and wise. And now, I help others spot the signs before it's too late. And if you are in a place like I was, hear this. You don't need to have a perfect plan to leave. You don't need to wait until the damage is bad enough. You don't need to stay out of fear. You only need one small, brave step. Then another. And then one more. Until one day, you'll wake up to the sound of birds, the light spilling into your room, and realize you're free. And you never, ever, have to go back. And if you are in a place like I was, hear this. You don't need to have a perfect plan to leave. You don't need to wait until the damage is bad enough. You don't need to stay out of fear. You only need one small, brave step. Then another. And then one more. Until one day, you'll wake up to the sound of birds, the light spilling into your room, and realize you're free. And you never, ever, have to go back. A local women's shelter contacted me after one of my anonymous Reddit posts went semi-viral. They asked if I'd be willing to come speak, to tell my story in person. At first, I hesitated. My story felt too personal, too messy. I worried I wasn't put together enough to be a voice for others. But then I remembered how many women messaged me privately, saying they saw themselves in my story. That they needed to hear from someone who made it out. So I said yes. The night of the talk, I stood in a room of 30 women, some survivors, some still stuck in their own storms. My palms sweated. My breath caught. But then I began. I was 26 when I finally realized that survival wasn't the same as living. I talked about the red flags, the silent screams, the subtle manipulation. I talked about the day I left, the quiet chaos of that getaway, the way I sobbed in my dad's car not from grief, but from freedom. When I finished, the room was still. Then a woman in the back raised her hand and asked, "Do you ever forgive him?" I paused. "No," I said, softly but firmly. "But I forgave myself. And that changed everything." She cried. So did I. Weeks later, I got a letter. A real one. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. Jagged, almost angry in the way each word was pressed onto the page. It was from Tom. He'd found a way to send something past the digital blocks. Inside, he rambled, about how I'd abandoned him, how I owed him closure. He mentioned his new living situation, and said he hoped I'd grown up. At first, I felt that old panic crawl up my spine. But then I read it again. And I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I realized how powerless those words were now. Tom was stuck in the same loop he'd always been in, blame, guilt, denial. But I had moved on. Grown. Reclaimed. I took the letter outside, lit it with a match, and dropped it into a metal dish. I watched the flames devour every word, every insult, every ounce of control. I wasn't burning a letter. I was burning the last string he had to me. It wasn't a dramatic moment, but it was the right one. We were sitting in the kitchen after dinner. Music was playing. My hair was messy, and I was wearing pajama pants with little cartoon planets on them. Sam stood up, walked over, and slid a simple ring across the table. "I don't want to fix you," he said. "You did that yourself. I just want to keep loving you through whatever comes next." I didn't cry. I smiled. Because for once, I didn't need rescuing. I was choosing him, not because I needed safety, but because I had finally learned to choose myself first. And in doing that, I became ready to choose real love. I said yes. One of the most beautiful parts of my healing was repairing my relationship with my parents. They had made mistakes, yes. They hadn't known how to reach me when I was drowning. But they never stopped hoping. My mom began inviting me over for tea every Sunday. She showed me old photo albums, and we talked, not about the past, but about the future. My dad helped me fix a bookshelf in my new place and told me, "You are the strongest person I know." Those words stayed with me. Not bravest. Not toughest. Strongest. Because strength isn't never breaking. It's breaking and building yourself back, stronger, softer, wiser. I work at a publishing company now, something I once thought was just a dream. I get to read, write, and connect with authors and readers alike. I even helped edit a memoir written by a woman who survived trafficking. We cried together in the editing room. I told her, "Your voice matters." She told me, "So does yours." Sam and I live in a flat filled with light, books, music, and quiet mornings. We take turns making breakfast. Sometimes we argue, sure, but it's never cruel. We resolve things. We listen. We make plans, not apologies. And when I go to bed at night, I don't sleep with one eye open. I don't clench my teeth or dream of running. I sleep peacefully. Deeply. Safely. If you're reading this, still with me through every word, I want you to know something. I don't share my story for sympathy. I share it for you. For the woman scrolling Reddit at 2 a.m. wondering if her partner's behavior is normal. For the girl who believes her loneliness is too deep to ever be filled with real love. For the survivor who left but still hears his voice echoing in her mind. You are not broken. You are not crazy. You are not to blame. And you are not alone. The girl I was in 2019 would never have believed this life was possible. But she planted the seeds the moment she walked away. I just kept watering them. Tom is gone. The pain he caused is no longer a wound, it's a scar. A reminder of what I overcame. A mark of survival, not defeat. I used to believe I was trapped. Now I know better. I was never a prisoner, I just hadn't found the key yet. Turns out, the key was always inside me. And the door? It was never locked.